to it as a union because it's not. It's a federation. Because they continue to employ Bob Kroll, he becomes the de facto policy leader of the Minneapolis Police Department. Because when the police chief makes a policy and no one actually has to follow it because of Bob Kroll, that makes Bob Kroll responsible for police policy. That makes him hold the accountability for police policy. He defines the terms. And frankly, the fact that they have not gotten rid of him over all of the reasons that they could have shows me that, in fact, the city leadership wants him there because he can say the things that they wish they could, but that they cannot. And so he is there for a reason. He's there because they want him there. He's there to serve a particular function, to vilify the victims of police violence, to destroy their families. He does this, and they allow it to continue. He talks about ongoing investigations, which is a grotesque violation, again, legally and policy-wise. He flaunts every policy that the Minneapolis police have, and thus shows that other officers don't have to follow those policies either. And again, they allow it to continue. He could have been gone very long ago, but they have allowed it to continue. And so this is on the mayor's office, who oversees the police chief and the police department and has the ultimate responsibility for discipline. This is on the mayor's office. It's also on the city council. It's on our elected leadership, you know, because Bob Kroll's going to be Bob Kroll, okay? I've referred to him at times as a cartoon character. He does something that the city wants him to do, and that's why they haven't gotten rid of him, and that's the facts. So at this point, I'm going to call up Betty Smith. Her son was Quincy Smith, known and loved in the community as Q the Blacksmith on KMOJ radio. And he was killed by a friend of Bob Kroll's and was immediately vilified after he was dead. And so, Betty, with that, I'd like to bring you up. Here you are. Thank you.
This is Quincy's son. He's now 11, and we thank everyone for the support to keep our family fighting for justice for his father. I'm here today to say, yes, Bob Kroll has to go because I am a direct victim of his bad leadership. He says, when asked what could he do to change this, he says he doesn't know. And I have a direct quote that I have picked up. Well, we asked him, what do you do to change it, this police brutality and stuff? He says, I don't know. All I can say is our cops are not out there hunting people. That's for damn sure. That's true. They're not hunting. They're killing because they know that he will give them a pass. They know that he's going to vilify, talk about the person. I mean, the media tries to make Q the Blacksmith out to be the most horrible person in the world. But thank God the community knows differently so that his son will know his dad was not this monster that Bob Kroll and all of them are trying to put out to be. Bob Kroll himself has been a policeman, a victim of assault. Our chief filed a complaint against him when he was a policeman. So, of course, he wants to try and get rid of him. But our chief knows what's going on in that department, knows the power that they're allowing Mr. Kroll to have, and unless we stop up as people, he will continue to do it. You and I could not commit these vicious excuses that he's doing and get away with it. I worked in healthcare, and I can tell you if I murdered one person, my nursing license would have been removed. I don't care how good of a nurse I had been, I murdered another person. Whether that person was a killer, a bank robber, or whatever, I murdered him, and I would be removed. No one has that right, and we need to stop allowing Bob Kroll to let our police think that it's okay to do what they do. Quincy was murdered just as viciously, or even more so, than George Floyd. Quincy was tasered. He was beaten. There were 5 officers holding him down in the snow. And I work with the city, and they do everything they can to keep that from coming out. Yes, he died of cardiac arrest. Close your eyes and try and imagine 5 tasers tasing you. And you simultaneously, they didn't take turns. They were trying to fry my baby like he was a Thanksgiving turkey. The medical examiner said his death was a homicide. You or I couldn't be accused of a homicide and still be working or walking. These people need to be held accountable, and we need to remove the person who is giving them the okay. Oh, go ahead. Look at the videos. That man was on George Floyd's neck, and this man is here begging for his life. Look at his face. It didn't say I'm serving with compassion or protecting you. It says I'm serving a beatdown. To hear someone begging for their life, whoever you are, you're supposed to help them. And we will let these police say that's what they're doing. They're not. To sit there with your knee on a man's neck and not worry about what's going to happen is because you know the leadership behind you, your secret weapon, Bob Kroll, is going to get you off.
That's right. That's right.
And unless we as people step up and say we got to get rid of that, it's like a rat in your house. You put poison out and kill it.
Come on.
So put some poison out here with our voices, because we vote and say we don't need a person there who is not serving us with compassion or protecting us.
That's right.
All of us. All police are not bad, but he is definitely a friend of those who are not.
That's right.
Because he understands what they're doing, because he has did it. As he has come up through the ranks, he has did it. He has been a victim of a lawsuit himself. He knows how to get rid of all of this. And as long as you've got people who are afraid to step out there, this will continue. We have to step out there, say it's not what we want, because you elected it. If you do nothing, it's saying it's okay.
Yeah.
When my son was murdered and all this vicious stuff was coming out about him, we're not, which wasn't an issue. 5 officers murdered this man, and you want to say they did nothing? Unless we allow Bob Kroll to continue to give these officers immunity, to get him to challenge the police chief who we put out there to say, do your discipline, then we can't expect anything different.
Right. Yes.
For them to say, shut your mouth because something's going to happen to you, and you shut up, then you can expect nothing different.
Right. That's right.
If Bob Kroll had been gone in 2007, when this lawsuit started with him, a lot of our young black men today would probably still be alive,
That's
including
right.
my child.
Right. Say that. Say that.
My son would still have his father,
Yes.
who was a good man and looking out for his children. He worked in this community trying to do this change that we've got going on. Quincy had a lawsuit against the 5 that was in his thing, and it was 3 weeks later, my child is dead. You tell me that's not retaliation?
That's right.
And then you want to go back to an incident that he was involved in, which half of it was not true. No gun. Cardiac arrest comes from being tased.
Yes.
And as long as we stand back and allow somebody, Bob Kroll, to say, it's okay, I'm going to protect you, we will continue to lose our young men.
That's
Our
right.
children will still grow up without a father. The payout that the cities give is not money for the family. You need that family to raise those children
That's right.
that they have taken away that child's financial support. So to talk about they've given up all these settlements and stuff, they should give something. You rob the child of their future,
That's right.
then you should contribute to it. Their family, my grandmother should not have to figure out how to provide for his college. I sent my child to college. Leaders like Bob Kroll have made those things possible. Yes, the person who was murdered may have did something that wasn't right. There's not a person in this room, in this nation, in this world who has not done something wrong. But that does not give the police the right to kill you.
That's right.
It does not give Bob Kroll the right to say, it's okay. He had a counterfeit bill. Oh, it's okay. His girlfriend said he did something to her. It's not true. But that's what they want to throw out there to you instead of saying, well, Bob Kroll did this, and Bob Kroll did that, or those officers did this, or those officers did that. None of that is put out there, but yet they want to blame the victim. He has some blame, but you do not have the right to kill him.
That's right.
And you have no right, Bob Kroll, to tell him it's okay.
That's right.
Is it going to be okay if by some chance a family member of yours is caught up in this and murdered? Because he got a suntan that made him really, really dark and got mistaken for a black man.
Right.
Is that what it's going to take for Bob Kroll to change his thought about letting people go free, about slapping them on the hand and say, one more? He said he didn't know how to change this. He said that. Well, then get out of the way and let somebody who can change it do it. How dare you tell the American people or the people of Minneapolis that you're not going anywhere? This is not his country.
That's right.
It's not his city.
That's right.
It's not his state.
That's right.
He is not our parents.
That's right.
He is not our God. So what makes you say you're not going anywhere? You got to go somewhere. Because I want my son, my grandson, not to meet the same fate that his father met, because he might have, because of the fact that he has this beautiful chocolate skin,
That's right.
but because he might be walking down the street. Our young men can't walk down the street without the police stopping them and searching them. And if it's into an altercation, they will be smiling just like that man did with his neck on George Ford. Nothing's going to happen to me. Let's see how long he can breathe. Really? Are we going to stand back and allow one person to stand in the way of stopping that?
That's right.
So we got to step out there, because out of his own mouth, he said he didn't know how to do change. He's not a good leader. He called killing hunting. There's a big difference in hunting an animal and killing a person.
Yes.
And it has to stop. And it's not going to stop unless we continue to put the pressure on, unless we tell this man who said he's not going anywhere, he's going somewhere on vacation, go home, get a job as a janitor, go work in the undertaker's place, but he's got to go somewhere. Because as long as he's there and people are afraid of what his power can do, collectively we have more power than any of these elected officials.
That's right. That's right.
Collectively. We've got to do it collectively and stay together with it. Support each other, and it will happen. Because nobody can say I'm not going anywhere.
And now we'll hear from Darlene Abby Blevins, who is the sister of Thurman Blevins, who was killed by the Minneapolis police.
Hi, my name is Darlene Blevins. I'm the sister of Thurman Blevins that was killed on June 23rd of 2008. That was killed on June 23rd of 2018. And I just wanted to add some things in about Bob Kroll, because I felt that, you know, when my brother was killed, that he did say a lot of lies that was put out there about him turning, pointing a gun, and clearly you can see in that video that he didn't turn and there was no gun, and it wasn't even no shot that went off at that time. But Bob Kroll, you know, out there spreading his lies, saying that he fired a shot, and that's why the police fired as well. And, you know, Bob Kroll, you know, he creates a lot of, you know, just hostile situations when it comes to these killings. And, you know, it's really, you know, it's messed up for the families, it's messed up for the community, because why spread all these lies, you know, and tell all these things that's not true, you know, to the media, you know what I mean? And the investigation hasn't even started yet.
Right.
But you putting out all these lies and telling these things out here to these people that's not even true. You know, and I didn't appreciate that, because I knew my brother was a good man. I knew he was a good father. He didn't deserve to be killed the way that he was killed, you know, and it really brought me back to George Floyd when he was being killed. You know, he had asked, please, and my brother said the same thing, please, you know, don't kill me. And I cannot understand that for the world of me. Why would you want to kill somebody and they pleaded for their life? I would never understand that. If somebody's telling me, please, that's a, you know, something saying, hey, maybe I want to say something. Maybe I'm trying to talk to you. Maybe we're trying to, you know, get this situation handled. Why kill him and shoot him down like that? You know what I mean? I won't never understand that for the world of me, when somebody is begging for their life and you won't give them a chance like you're God or something. You have no right to take their life. He had, you know, just like everybody else out here, a fair chance to, you know, say what was going on, not be chased down like an animal and shot down like that and left in the alley. You know, he was a human being. He had a soul. He had a heart. You know, he was a father. He had his whole life ahead of him. He was young. You know, that don't make no sense to put people through that. You know, and exactly, you know, like Betty said about, you know, Bob Kroll saying about the hunting. He said the same thing about my brother. Fair game. My brother wasn't an animal. You know, he was a human being, a grown man. He wasn't an animal. This is not, we ain't hunting out here. You know, black people and all individuals, they're not, you know, animals out here. You know, they shouldn't be attacked. They shouldn't be shot down. There shouldn't be none of that going on. And Bob Kroll definitely needs to go. because he's been in there too long. He's been in there running it down to the ground. Him and Mike Freeman. They both in there covering it all up, spreading their lies around, covering up for them cops when they know they doing wrong. The videotape tells you right there they doing wrong. So make it happen and prosecute these goddamn cops out here. And definitely we need to get Bob Kroll out there because we need change.
Thank you. Thank you. Darlene does an excellent job of talking about this case, but I can tell you that our organization investigated this case thoroughly. We did a complete and total reinvestigation, and much of what Bob Kroll said, virtually everything he said was a lie. And there is a lawsuit pending, and therefore I'm not going to say more about the details, but I can tell you they'll be out soon. And you will see very quickly how much of a lie this was. I want to read a statement from Carlotta Madison. And Carlotta Madison is the sister of Andre Madison, who was shot during an operation that was run by Bob Kroll, that was a no-knock warrant to the house because of a $5 marijuana sale. And Bob Kroll was the leader of that particular operation. It was a mess from the beginning. They broke into the house, again, no knock, and the police started shooting immediately. The police in the front, where Kroll was, were shooting, and the police in the back heard that shooting, and they started shooting. They filled up that house with over 400 bullets. And when they shot Andre, they created a 4-inch hole in his neck, and they shot his arm. And I remember working on that case, and the lies that Bob Kroll put out about it from his own handiwork are outrageous. And so this is a statement from Carlotta. She's not able to be here because she's out of town, but I wanted to read this statement. My name is Carlotta Madison. My brother Andre Madison was shot by the Minneapolis police in November 1996 during a botched raid on his apartment over the word of an informant that there was $5 worth of marijuana in the apartment. Robert Kroll led the team that raided my brother's apartment. Over 400 rounds were fired by police, and my brother was hit in the neck, leaving a 4-inch hole in his throat and in his arm. Despite his extensive injuries, he managed to survive. After my brother was shot, Kroll and the other officers yelled racial epithets at him as they beat him. Robert Kroll has been criminalizing police brutality victims for many years. In 1998, he used his smear campaign against my brother, Andre, and against another victim, Lawrence Miles Jr., who was also shot by the police. I am in awe of how he is able to use these tactics again after all these years. Both Andre and Lawrence lived to tell their truth of what happened to them, yet still were victims of the vilification by Bob Kroll. Bob Kroll's racist attacks on victims have been extremely hurtful to families. He uses this tactic to justify shooting, hurting, and murdering black people as they somehow deserved it. We all know no one deserves to be treated this way. I work hard, and I understand the need for union representation, but the Police Federation can do better than racist Bob Kroll. And that's our statement. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Nakima Levy-Armstrong. I am a civil rights attorney and the founder of the Racial Justice Network. I am here standing in solidarity with these families, with civil rights organizations, with advocates, and with Minneapolis residents who are fed up with Bob Kroll and the abuse that he has been allowed to inflict upon this city. I want those who live in the suburbs and the exurbs to think about how you would feel if police officers came into your town, a place in which they did not live, and they inflicted violence and abuse and even murder upon the people who live in your town. Now think about this. Would you allow people to come into your town and do what members of the Minneapolis Police Department are doing here in Minneapolis? 92% of Minneapolis police officers, including Bob Kroll, do not live in the city of Minneapolis. So they are being allowed to come from your suburban and exurban communities and inflict harm and damage upon adults and even children within our community in the city of Minneapolis. Enough is enough. We are calling for a paradigm shift in the city of Minneapolis in terms of the future of public safety, in terms of how officers are hired, in terms of who even remains upon the force, because those officers who have a history of excessive force and murder, we are demanding that they be removed from the Minneapolis Police Department in order to protect the residents who live there. Bob Kroll represents the worst of what Minneapolis police officers have to offer. And it is a travesty of justice that the rank and file police officers would elect him as their leadership. Some officers, in the wake of George Floyd being killed, issued a statement that they want to be part of the change. If that is the case, then rise up with us and demand that Bob Kroll be immediately removed from the Minneapolis Police Department and as head of the Minneapolis Police Federation. He does not have credibility. He has reinforced murder on the parts of many officers within the police department. He constantly undermines city leadership, and he has absolutely zero respect for the residents of the city of Minneapolis, and particularly black people who live in Minneapolis. One example of Bob Kroll's brutality was when he kicked and beat a 15-year-old biracial boy. Can you imagine him being allowed to go to Hugo and kick and beat one of the residents who live there and get away with it? Could you imagine him being able to kick and beat a 15-year-old boy who lives in Hugo? Absolutely not. So why is it acceptable for him to be allowed to come to Minneapolis to do this? Bob Kroll breeds insubordination, and the media outlets give him space, knowing that he has ties to a white supremacist group, and knowing that he continues to speak things that are damaging to people in the city of Minneapolis and damaging to police-community relations. So we urge Mayor Jacob Fry to do the right thing. You are a lawyer, Mayor Jacob Fry. You know that there is power under the law to remove Bob Kroll. And we would ask for the city council, although we are not right now in Powderhorn Park pandering to people, that you would do your jobs and demand the removal of Bob Kroll. We will not continue to stand for the evil that he has perpetuated, the white supremacy, the injustice, the racism, and the brutality of members of the Minneapolis community. And we will not rest until he is fired. Thank you.
Practitioner, owner of a mental health practice. I'm a member of the Racial Justice Network and supporter of many of the groups and individuals who are boots on the ground, standing up against injustices that that are condoned and supported by this city government. I want to read something to you from our past, but it is still relevant today. If you are not careful, the newspapers and the media will have you hating the people who are being oppressed and loving the people who are doing the oppressing. Media. It has been said, yes, that is a quote from Malcolm X. It has been said today that you give this individual, I can't even call him a man, the way he is treating and behaving, giving him room to spew the hate and evil that he does. I am a black man who is the victim of police violence. I have been beat. I have had money stolen. I have been racially profiled. I have been pulled over simply because I was driving a nice car that I worked hard for. And I was told that I was lucky that my family was standing there with me. This is what Bob Kroll defends. As it has been said already, We watched the video of what happened to Mr. George Floyd. Chauvin killed a man and used 3 other officers to support him in that murder. And they are now charged, as they should be, with aiding and abetting a murder. And as it should be for Bob Kroll and Mike Freeman, because they are spreading lies and trying to cover up a murder. And if any of us and any of you did that, you would be charged with aiding and abetting a crime. Crimes are being committed by those who are supposed to be upholding the law. And instead of them being held accountable, this individual is calling those individuals heroes. In what world is a murderer a hero? In what world is someone who has 50 complaints, over 50 complaints, who has beat and shot individuals who were handcuffed, knocked their teeth out, 11 lawsuits, and is still held in a position as a president? How in the world is that okay? And how in the world can anyone stand and defend that? Citizens of Hugo, shame on you. Shame on you. You are just as culpable. Because simply if you stand by and do nothing, you are a part of the problem instead of being a part of the solution. Now, citizens of Hugo, those of you who do not condone it, we urge you to speak up. Use your voice. Use your influence. Let the crooked individuals that live in your city know that they are not welcome there. It is painful for me to hear these stories that the families have shared. I am shaking right now because I'm being triggered and traumatized by those stories. And I'm sure they are as well. But I applaud their courage to come here and stand up and speak their truth so that the world can know what the truth is about what is happening here in Minneapolis and in the Twin Cities. We know that they are being threatened because we are being threatened for standing up and speaking truth to power. But what we know is we are the ones that hold the power because we are the citizens. What do we want? Justice! When do we want it? Now! Thank you.
So I'm DJ Hooker, and I'm with TCC for J. And I just want to say it's crazy how we're going on our 3rd month since George Floyd was lynched in broad daylight. And the guy who always promised to protect the killer slave catchers, the cops, is still allowed to not only have a job, but also continue to be the Federation's president. And it's crazy to me how much support he has from Mayor Fry. Yeah, y'all heard me right. Bob has an unprecedented amount of support from our progressive mayor, because I want to remind everyone, there is no such thing as neutrality. White silence is white violence. And let me tell you, this man in this office right over here has been very violent to people of color during his entire term, from gentrifying our neighborhoods, but also protecting white supremacists like Kroll by not firing them. I mean, just think about this all for a second. We're at the epicenter of this movement that's not just about loving black lives, but it's saying that black lives are worthy, black lives are beloved, and black lives are needed. The saddest thing to me is this ask is not something super controversial. We're asking you to fire a known racist, a known Trump supporter, and someone we know who has kicked the teeth in of little brown kids. In a town that prouds itself on how progressive they are, do you know, on a town that prouds itself on how progressive we are, do you know we have states around the country passing laws in effect that are steps in the right direction for people of color? But in Minnesota, the place that Floyd was actually murdered in cold blood, all we get is watered down half measures. And a mayor without a spine. Mayor Fry is a prime example why we need community control of the police, because the community would have fired Kroll's ass years ago.
So my name is Jess Sundin. I'm with Twin Cities Coalition for Justice for Jamar as well. And we're here today. We've already heard from community members and community leaders about the violence and harm that Bob Kroll has perpetrated upon the people of Minneapolis. But I've got more than 250,000 more reasons why Bob Kroll has to go. We have two national organizations, the Color of Change and Police Unions Exposed, who have collected 261,449 petition signatures. So these boxes behind me, each one of them has almost 30,000 signatures in it. And here's what these people had to say, what they signed on to. Bob Kroll, the leader of the Minneapolis Police Union, just called George Floyd a violent criminal, called the protests a terrorist movement, and he is defending the 4 officers who participated in killing Floyd. Kroll has said, quote, "I've been involved in 3 shootings myself. Not one of them has bothered me. We call on you to denounce and publicly call for the resignation of Bob Kroll as the leader of Minneapolis Police Federation and commit to removing him from power." These petitions are addressed to the mayor, the city council, and the chief. We're outside the mayor's office because we know he has that power. We need everyone in this city to have their voices heard, along with the 250,000 people from around the country, including here. Bob Kroll's time is up. He's got to go.
Now we'll take a couple of questions before we deliver these petitions to Mayor Jacob Fry's office. Any questions?
I just have a question about the petitions. How many did you say there were again, and where were they gathered?
Go ahead.
There's 261,449 petition signatures. They were collected on a Move On platform. It's an online platform. So it is people from across the country.
And Color, so MoveOn.org and Color of Change both collected these signatures. So we have people from right here in the state of Minnesota, but all around the country, who have signed on demanding the removal of Robert Kroll. Any other questions? Yes.
With such a horrendous record as Bob Kroll's going back decades or more, why hasn't the mayor's office and previous administrations before him addressed this issue?
Well, I'll ask, do you want to respond?
Sure. It's clear to me that the reason Bob Kroll hasn't been removed is because he performs a function for the city. He says the things that they wish they could say. You know, I think about these announcers in sports games, or some of these sports players that say racist things, and they are immediately dropped from their team. They are taken away from the microphone so they can do no further harm, things like that. These things happen all the time. People lose their jobs when they spout off racist nonsense, or, you know, when they say hurtful things like that. But Bob Kroll does this routinely, and he does it after every killing by police or every outrageous incident or critical type incident. And the city takes no action. They don't rein him in. They don't tell him, sit down and stop talking about an ongoing investigation. They don't say, you violated a policy. In fact, of those 54 allegations against him, 5 have been upheld and disciplined. Only 5. The rest have been tossed. And they were including the ones that we made about his violations of the Hatch Act and the police policy of use of uniforms and police squads in political advertising. And so we know that the city is not actually trying to hold him accountable because they had many reasons they could have. But they choose to allow that to go on because, again, I think he actually performs a function for them. He vilifies that victim. They're worried about a lawsuit, so they set it up so that they badmouth these people so that when the jury gets selected, it's going to be very hard to find an unbiased jury. You know, he performs a function, and they allow it to continue. You know, in no other field can you be an open racist like this and keep your job.
Come on, say that.
So we know that he is clearly getting special treatment by the mayor's office, who has every ability to fire him. Thank you.
I'll also briefly add just a couple more points. Bob Kroll has a history of intimidating elected officials and also helping to buy the support, if you will, of elected officials because of the union's campaign contributions to different people's campaigns. So that is a part of this culture of protecting someone who is wreaking a lot of harm on the people of the city of Minneapolis and being able to get away with it. The other aspect of all of this is that the Minneapolis Police Department has a consistent history of failing to discipline abusive and problematic officers. And so the culture that has been created amongst our elected officials has allowed people like Bob Kroll to get so far out of control where he can openly condone the murder of unarmed civilians and not be held accountable. And as we mentioned earlier, the media plays a role. We have seen so many people in the media who are supposed to be unbiased and impartial take off the facade of being impartial after our demonstration in Hugo, making statements about the protesters in Hugo, but not making similar statements when police are killing civilians in the city of Minneapolis. Being more concerned about paper puppets than black lives being killed, which is unconscionable and unacceptable. And it shows you the kind of hostile environment that we are in as African Americans and other people of color in the city of Minneapolis and in the state of Minnesota, and it's unacceptable.
That's right.
Any other questions?
Are you guys going to be going back up there to Kroll's house?
So anyone who's watched our protests know that when we decide to make moves, we don't broadcast it until we're ready. So if we do decide to go to Hugo, I'm sure you will become aware of it.
Will John Thompson be going up there with you guys?
Where John Thompson isn't here, you'd have to contact him directly. Next question.
What he did up there?
Next question.
Is the mayor the only one that can fire Kroll, or can the police chief too? And if so, what has the mayor said to you directly why he doesn't?
The police chief and the mayor both have the power to fire Bob Kroll. And in terms of the mayor's response, it right now is inadequate. He needs to get the courage to do the right thing because the evidence and the information is there. So there is no reason from my perspective other than a lack of political will to do the right thing and possibly fear of retaliation and repercussions. Because what have we seen happen since George Floyd has been killed? We have seen a slowdown in response to 911 calls. We have seen mayhem happen in the city of Minneapolis, shootings. Those things don't happen in a vacuum. Part of why it is happening is because of the retaliation against the city as a result of the uprisings that happened in response to George Floyd being murdered. So that is why the entire culture needs to shift, and removing Bob Kroll is the first step to making that happen.
But he's giving you no direct answer, just sidestep?
He has not given a sufficient answer. He has sidestepped the question. And like I said, I believe there's a lack of political will. There's also a need for courage. But we want Mayor Jacob Frey, although we don't always see eye to eye, he needs to know that he would have my support. He would have the support of many residents of the city of Minneapolis by doing the right thing and firing Bob Kroll. We'll take one more question. All right. Seeing no, oh, go ahead. One thing that people can do is pick up the phone, go to your computers as well, and contact Mayor Jacob Fry, contact the city council members, contact the chief's office, and demand that Bob Kroll be removed. You can also put pressure on the rank and file officers to unelect Bob Kroll, because right now he is a face of white supremacy, evil, and violence, but he is also the face of the 800 rank and file members of the Minneapolis Police Department. So there is no way that we can build trust with them if they continue to allow him to be their leader. He lacks credibility. He is not accountable. He is a cancer on the city of Minneapolis.
I would add one more thing.
You have to come up to the mic.
If I could add one more thing, that would be if the elected officials in the city of Hugo love Bob Kroll so much, hire him on their department so that he can go out there and do what he does to us, to them, and see how much they like it.
I'll also add one last thing, and this is back to the local media. I urge the local media to interview the countless 100 families who have suffered in the hands of police brutality in the city of Minneapolis. We need to humanize this issue because Minnesotans are more outraged about buildings on fire and a protest in Hugo than the killings of black people. This is sad. And so I challenge Fox 9, because Fox 9 has been doing a great job of putting small documentaries, of projecting some long stories to humanize this conversation. I encourage the other channels to do that. Do investigations so that you can expose this department, you can expose the behavior of Bob Kroll, because there's a lot of people who have a lot of stories to share. So the media, you have a role in this moment. We have a role in this moment to tell the story as it is happening today, because there is a change in America, and it's starting right here in Minneapolis. The people are fed up and tired. So do not sit there and side with the oppressor. Side with the people and tell the stories. And I trust many of you reporters in here. I've known you, I've talked to you. I know you care about these things. This is the moment right now for you to also lead, because many Minnesotans are not hearing this pain of these families. They're not seeing these stories. They're not seeing the pattern of behavior, and they're not seeing how corrupt this system is, where a police officer who commits crime over and over and over cannot be fired, cannot be prosecuted. This is just a reality we live in. And that's our tax dollars, which means you are part of the problem. And now you can be part of the solution. So I implore to the citizens of this great city of Minneapolis, you have done a lot of wonderful things, but today you have an opportunity to do even more. And this moment right now, I'm asking all of the white residents, because many of you, when you get upset, you do not give up until something changes. Get upset for Black lives under attack. Get upset when we are not heard, not seen, and not believed. Because that is itself the tragedy that we are seeing today.
That's right. And this is the last thing that I will say before we take the petitions in. We want the members of the media to know, number one, we thank you all for being here. We know that many of you have covered our protests, but what we would ask you to do and urge you to do is to let your stations know that it is time for a paradigm shift in terms of how you cover police murder cases. That's right. The faux pas, the intentional miscommunication and false information that came forward from the Minneapolis Police Department after George Floyd was killed should show you all that there is a major problem within the system, because typically your media outlets print what the police say word for word. We know that that information is not credible, that there are other sides to the story, that you all have to be more responsible for going to gather. And I will also add that it is not your job as the media to protect and defend Liz Collin. She knows who she married. That's number one. And number two, Liz Collin has used her platform as a journalist at WCCO to give her now husband a platform when they were dating, and she did not publicly disclose that information. And she continues at times to report on these issues, which is unacceptable. It is a very clear conflict of interest, and the backlash we have particularly seen from people in the media that we thought were professional, that we thought were unbiased shows that her influence as Bob Kroll's wife reaches far and wide, and it is a detriment to black lives. So do your job as the media. Report fair and balanced stories. And you see all the people who are standing here with us, all of us have a voice, and we have a different perspective to share if you would reach out and not try to manipulate stories to fit a white supremacist agenda. So with that, we're going to knock on the door and ask Heidi to come on out. Please knock on the door. And we are going to deliver these petitions that contain over 261,000 signatures calling for the removal of Bob Kroll. Thank you, Heidi. Heidi, thank you for being here and accepting these 261,000 signatures. We would ask that you deliver these petitions to Mayor Jacob Fry and let him know that the people of the city of Minneapolis, the state of Minnesota, and around the nation have spoken. We want to see the removal of Bob Kroll from the Minneapolis Police Department. Thank you. If the press wants to take pictures of the delivered signatures, you're welcome to do that. Thank you all again for being here. We appreciate it. Thank you all for being here.
Hey, hey! Oh, oh!